Welcome everybody. It's really great to be here. Thank you for joining me for this webinar. This is the first of a series of webinars, and it's actually my first solo rodeo as well. So I'm excited to be here, a little bit nervous, but I'm sure it's going to be great. And this is part of a series of webinars as part of the Talking to Action campaign, which is Music Mark's campaign to help the membership really turn talking to action and be a force for change with regard to the equity, diversity and inclusion. So as we meet, I know there's an awful lot happening in the world, domestically, internationally, obviously. So I really want to start by acknowledging you all for being here and taking the time to really engage with me with this important topic. And if you're a music education hub, I'm aware there's a lot of pressure on you at the moment and you've had quite a lot of demands on your time. So again, I really, truly appreciate you being here. Thank you so much. So a little bit about the session. My name is Sam Simpson, I should say. I'll share a little bit more about myself in a bit. But before we start the session, I have a very important disclaimer. So I have something called Meniere's disease, and I'm really keen to raise awareness of it. So if you've never heard of it before, please check out the link which we put up in the chat. So Meniere's disease, or MD as it's sometimes called, causes sudden attacks of dizziness, vertigo, nausea, and sometimes vomiting. And although I've not had one while presenting to tape, touch wood, it is possible that it might happen during the session. So if I do have an attack, I am joined by my lovely associate and coach and friend Yinka, and she'll step in and bring the webinar to a close. And we've also got Rachel and Matthew here from Music Mark and my lovely assistant Fatima. If I do suddenly have to stop, please don't worry. I usually just need to lie down for a little bit and I generally recover after a few hours. As I said though, so far so good. So let's think positive and carry on. So this 90-minute webinar today is designed to share with you my thoughts, my knowledge, my expertise. I don't class myself as an expert per se, but I do have considerable knowledge and expertise of this area, which combined with the intersection of my identity, my professional and personal journey, means that I've learned a lot along the way, which I believe can be of use. So the session is really designed to be of value to you, and I'm by no means presuming you don't already possess this knowledge. And if you do, it serves as a validation and a reminder for you. And if you don't, enjoy, you are welcome. For those of you who need it, closed captions have been enabled and I will endeavour to speak slowly so that what you read makes sense. But do let me know if you need me to slow down. Okay, so next, I just want to have a little moment to give you some housekeeping and a few invitations before we start. So I'd like you to get involved in the session, use the chat, and if you have any questions, please can I ask that you put them in the Q&A tab and not in the chat. I won't have the opportunity to go through the chat at the end and find your questions. So if you've got any burning questions, pop them in the Q&A. We will have time for questions at the end, but if there are too many to answer or any that just require a bit more in-depth response, I might do a separate video or a document to address them. As I said, I can't see you, which is a shame, but I'd really love you to get involved. So I'm going to invite you to use the chat and just highlight anything that resonates with you using the hashtag SLS. So hashtag SLS are my initials and my company name, but in this sense, it stands for sounds like sense. So whenever you hear something, you think, oh, that sounds like sense, or just something that resonates with you, I want you to do hashtag SLS and pop it in the chat. And this will be really useful for those people who couldn't make it today when they're accessing the recording. I invite you to be curious. Some of the things that I'm raising today might have you scratching your chin a little bit, but be curious about what I'm saying and lean in if anything makes you feel uncomfortable. Try and get comfortable with being comfortable. There are going to be some action slides, and these action slides are going to have this logo talking to action on there. I want you to take a screenshot of these or take a little snap with your camera. Okay, and this is for something, these are some things that you can take away and look at a later date. So whenever you see the TIA slide, it's a yellow slide, I want you to take a screenshot. And lastly, I'm sure this won't happen in this session, but I have to say it anyway, there's to be no gaslighting. This is a space that I aspire for everyone, especially me, to feel safe. I don't profess to say that this is a safe space. I don't think that exists. There's so many different views of what safe actually is. But I need to protect myself and others from harm. So any gaslighting or inappropriate comments or behaviours or arguing, not here. Take it out. There's a quote by James Baldwin that I absolutely love that says, "We can agree to disagree and still love each other. Unless, of course, your disagreement is rooted in my oppression and denial of my humanity and right to exist, in which case you can get the out of here." Before we start as well, a little note on language. So terminology that I'll use interchangeably will relate mainly to the key protected groups of race, gender assignment, sexual orientation, disability, and sex. And the terms that I might use include male, female, man, woman, girls and boys, LGBTQIA+, non-binary, Black, white, Asian, mixed, global majority when referring to race, person of color, people of color, non-white, ethnically diverse. I do not advocate for the use of the term BAME or BME for ethnic minorities, and that's my preference. I may refer to disabled, able-bodied, neurodiverse, and people who are marginalized, unrepresented, and non-dominant. And I, of course, acknowledge the limitations of these labels to identify people and groups of people, but I use them in the context of this webinar, and I invite you not to get too caught up in the semantics, which can sometimes cause as a serve as distraction from the real issues at hand. So if we're ready, let's begin. So I know that not everybody in the space knows me, so just a little bit about myself. I was born in London. My parents are from Jamaica in the Caribbean. I'm female. I use the pronouns she, her, and hers. And I'm the founder and CEO of SLS 360, which is an equity and inclusion consultant, which specializes in working within the arts and music education sector. And I started this company last year after over 20 years working in the music education as an assistant head of a music education hub, a music advisor, peripatetic music teacher, class teacher, and musician. I'm still a musician, although I don't practice much, viola and violin, and I am mum, human, and 2 cats. As the picture shows, I've spent most of my life as the only one in many spaces, from my primary school to choirs to orchestras, and actually as I've made it my mission to challenge and support organisations to be just a bit bolder and braver in their efforts so that our sector is more equitable, more representative, diverse in all its forms, and really fosters an inclusive culture where like they truly belong and has an equal opportunity to thrive and succeed. I love working directly with teachers and music educators also to ensure that the opportunities available for children fully embrace the principles of EDI, so that our children and young people can develop their true musical and be who they want to be in the world. And I'm a really big believer, if you can see it, you can be it. And that's why representation really matters, both in the workforce and in the curriculum. So when I deliver training and workshops, I really love to support music educators to raise their awareness and explore what it actually looks like to be an inclusive music practitioner. It means it's something that I'm very passionate about. Essentially, there are so many narratives and cultural norms that simply don't serve us anymore, but we have to all be brave enough to disrupt the status quo, let those old versions go, and take imperfect action, because the promise starts today. So why did I decide to do this webinar? Well, I want you to come with me on a visualization. Imagine you're driving along a road and you come across a huge pothole in the ground. What do you do? What do you do? Well, you go around it, hopefully, and you assume that others will see it too and do the same thing, right? Except that on this particular day, you notice that not everyone sees it. So what is the responsible thing to do? Well, the responsible thing to do would be to put up a warning sign and let people know that actually they need to take an alternative route. And the reason I've given you this analogy is because it really illustrates the reason for this webinar. I've witnessed quite a few organisations since I've been doing this work fall into some pretty big potholes or pitfalls, for want of a better word, when doing this work. This webinar is my way of highlighting some of those pitfalls to stop you from taking a wrong turn and provide an alternative route which will hopefully yield better outcomes. So I'll be highlighting 7 things music education organisations can do need to do and stop doing, I should say, to turn talk into action. But in actual fact, there are many more I could have mentioned. I was even thinking I might have to do another webinar, 7 more things, who knows? I've chosen these 7 as they are the most pertinent in my eyes, and if acted upon can have an immediate impact in your organization. So let's kick off with number 1. Number 1, stop focusing on equity, diversity, and inclusion. Now, I can't see your faces, but I'm sure there are a few expressions a bit like this. Love this guy. You're probably thinking, what? What do you mean stop focusing on equity, diversity, and inclusion? I understand you might well be shocked, and you're absolutely right to be shocked because everything you've heard up until now has been about EDI. You've been focusing on this for the best part of 2 years or more. You've thrown money at it, you've created strategies, you've appointed inclusion officers and had sessions on decolonizing the curriculum and diversifying the repertoire, and you've posted your black squares. I get it. Just breathe. It's okay, because just like the pothole, I'm here to show you there's another way. So stop talking about equity, diversity, inclusion, and start actually taking action to tackle either equity, diversity, or inclusion as discrete areas. Because equity, diversity, inclusion, or EDI or DE&I has become a real buzzword. It's become kind of cool and trendy. My associate Yinka put it beautifully the other day. It's like it's become the ASOS in the world of HR. I hope you all know ASOS. It's a online clothing company. And you know, it's what the cool kids do. And my suggestion and invitation is don't be ASOS. You want to be like Marks and Spencer. And I'm showing my age here. You want to be like Marks and Spencer for EDI, here for the next 100 years, still innovating and going strong with really robust strategies that last the test of time. But that requires a different approach, a more thorough and robust approach. So you need to take the time to explore each distinct area for your organization. So in terms of equity, if there is an issue where certain groups are being discriminated against or certain groups don't have equal opportunities to other people, you need to focus on reducing discrimination for that group. What about your senior leadership? Who gets opportunities of work over others? And what about representation? What does that actually mean? Is it a balance, representation of the community, of the UK, of London? If you have a role and you hope to attract and hire diverse candidates, be specific. You want more candidates of colour. Who? All of them? People who identify as Black or members of the South Asian community? Where specifically is there a lack of representation? If your workforce is predominantly white, with maybe more women than men and skewed towards the 40 to 65 age range, especially in the leadership positions, and you have a low visibility of openly disabled and LGBTQ plus people, acknowledge that and be clear. Focus your attention where it needs to go. If you're prioritizing creating a diverse workforce, but have no idea how people feel about working for your organization, you need to start with inclusion. Who is excluded and who feels excluded? Because inclusion is the route to diversity. So without equitable and inclusive structures in place to support a diverse work culture, you might find that you reach these candidates, but they don't stay. So what I'm trying to say is there's no shortcuts here. Well, there are, but they're full of potholes. So I want you to get your cameras ready because this is the first talk into action slide. Oops, let's go back one. Okay. Sorry, my computer is playing up a little bit. Here we go. The first talk into action slide, the equity or diversity or inclusion priority check. So I want you to take a screenshot of this. I've highlighted on the slide and all the TIA slides, key takeaways, questions that you can ask, possible actions, and also a self-reflection. But for this slide, the most important one for me are the answers to the questions. For your organization, what is equity? What is diversity? What is inclusion? What does it mean to you? Then once you are clear, ask yourselves how they show up differently in your organization. In terms of actions, you need to be very clear what each one means for you, define it, delve deeper so you know which areas to tackle first, and then ensure everyone who needs to know. If you have an action plan or strategy in place, where does each action sit within each discrete area and which areas are priority? So this is a slide for you to take away, but for now, I want you just to take a moment to reflect and think about how do you feel now about the idea of splitting up equity, diversity, and inclusion. And feel free to share in the chat. Maybe you're cool. Maybe you're like, yeah, we've been doing that anyway. Maybe you're like, oh, feeling a little bit overwhelmed. Or maybe you're excited to actually be able to focus deeper and get some real impact. Remember that wherever you are, it's absolutely okay. It's fine. There is no judgment here. But essentially, this is the work. I'm just going to see if I can get the chat to pop out so I can have a little look. Fantastic. Thank you very much. So SLS, time to stop lumping them all together. Absolutely. Thank you very much. SLS to you. Thank you, Naomi. Laura, easier for our staff to understand when separated. Yes, most definitely. And Rachel, dividing these up feels much more manageable. Well, in fact, it is. It is more manageable. There's that clarity there. So it's really important to do. Thank you very much, guys, playing full out in the chat. Okay, let's move on. Number 2, stop focusing on meeting goals and targets. Okay, again, please don't freak out. I know goals are important. They are essential if you want to measure progress and impact. But let's be clear, only SMART goals though, yeah, not those wishy-washy ones that no one can hold you to account to because they're too vague. You need to make sure the goals are SMART, you know the acronym: specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and time-bound. And let's face it, we all have goals. I set goals all the time, usually to do with my health, because I'm a bit of a health freak. So last year I set a goal to run 5K, smashed it. Now I easily run 10K. In January, I set a goal to do 2,022 push-ups in January. I know, don't ask me why, but I did. Did that, no problem. February now, I set a goal, run 2 miles every day. I missed 5 days. And after each day that I missed, I lost the motivation just a little bit more to keep going. But what I forgot to take into account is when I was doing my 2 miles a day, each day I planned to run, I would wake up at 5:30 in the morning before the madness of the day. Each day I tried to find a new route. I discovered something new. I ran in the rain and my time improved from 43 minutes to 26 minutes. And yet I was gutted because I missed 5 days. The thing is, if we're too goal orientated in this work, we find ourselves easily discouraged. And if we fail to meet that goal, even by a little bit, we can get derailed as a result of the setback. So organizations often have some really audacious EDI goals and ambitious targets to show their commitment to change. But if the focus is only on achieving the goal, the measure of success becomes seasonal and only significant once the goal is achieved. So instead of focusing on meeting goals and targets, focus on the growth journey. The growth journey helps us to determine who we need to become to achieve the goal. And it also measures value added and the distance traveled regardless of whether the goal is achieved or not. Focusing on the growth, for me especially, also negates the obsession with perfection and getting it right. I don't know about you, but I can be a bit of a perfectionist sometimes and trying to get it right all the time. So one of your targets might be to create an organizational EDI strategy and an action plan by the end of the year. But right from the beginning, when you set the goal, think about the growth opportunities in working towards this goal. So maybe you start by collecting data, talking to your staff about how they feel. You foster a culture of inclusion. You bring people together and they start to connect and listen more. You raise awareness through training. You discover individuals who are purpose-driven and actually want to step up and lead the work. You start to identify skills gaps and look at your recruitment and your retention and succession planning. And maybe, just maybe, the strategy isn't complete by the date plan, but the growth that has been made makes a significant difference to the organization. You may have a target that 40% of your workforce are ethnically diverse by the end of 2022. But how do you get there? Just with targeted recruitment, or spending time ensuring everyone understands why representation matters and that the culture is fit for purpose? Because diversity, if only seen through the lens of goals and within a strategy, it might look like difference, but may not actually make a difference. So instead of being overwhelmed and going into anxiety, instead you can focus on the enjoyment of learning, celebrating the small steps and milestones that be present to each moment on the journey. I love this illustration by Liz Hoslin, and actually she's got some fantastic illustrations out there. I've asked Fatima to share the link in the chat. Really great examples of just growth. And the fact that many of you are here and have signed the pledge for Talking to Action, maybe even have a greater understanding now of how to be an inclusive leader or aspiring ally. That speaks far more than the fact you may have hit your diversity targets or had an 80% attendance at your CPD sessions. So there's another quote that I absolutely love by Henry David Thoreau, which says, "What you get by achieving your goals is not as important as what you become by achieving your goals." So here comes our second Talking to Action slide. Growth is the goal reframer. Let's reframe what we think about goals. Let's really focus on the growth. So the key takeaways, really measure the distance traveled, not just the end destination, and celebrate. Take time to celebrate those small wins and milestones and create a culture where that's what happens within your organization. Think about how you can measure and capture this journey and how can you share it. This is really important because people think that they want to see you've achieved this goal, you've hit this target, but actually what's more interesting, how did you get there? And growth isn't linear. It goes up and down and all over the place like a scattergram, but that's really important for other people to see. Things that you can consider, actions you can consider is highlight the process and not just the goal. What is it that you're going to be doing to get there? Establishing that culture, and again, share with all and key staff. So here's another self-reflection, and please guys, engage in the chat. I've got the chat open, I can see it. What is coming up for you now when you think about growth instead of goals? What's coming up for you now? Rachel says, love that. I guess you're looking at the illustration, yeah. Charlotte says, journey, growth, development. Yeah, right from the start, as you're setting your goals and your intentions, making time for reflection, absolutely. It's something that doesn't happen enough. We are on the journey already, absolutely. We are. And do we really look back and see where we were and where we are now? Yep, no excuse to not do something little and often, absolutely. Fantastic. So really good points. And if you can sort of establish this culture in your organization as well, imagine it takes the pressure off people with their performance management as well. You have to meet this target. You have to exceed expectations, partially met. So goal orientated. How about we look at what they did trying to get there? Okay, moving on. Number 3. It will change for me. Here we go. Stop only making statements of intent. Now, I'm all about intention. Intention is more than wishful thinking. It is willful direction. Intention is more than wishful thinking. It is willful direction. We're surrounded by EDI intentions and commitments. The Talking to Action pledge has about 20 of them. So why am I asking you to stop making them? Well, the key word here is only. If you look at your EDI statements of intent, goals and commitments, many of them might start with "we will." Quite a few, I'm sure. I always set intentions. I set an intention that I was going to eat healthily and get daily exercise. Well, if you were holding me to account and said, "Oh, how's that going, Sam?" I could say, "Yeah, I'm doing great. Today I had 4 grapes and I ran up the stairs instead of walking." There you go. I can claim that. I've met that intention. So you see, when you're thinking about your intentions, stop only stating what you will do, but also what you'll stop doing. And this is one of the best ways to make your intentions and promises about change into a reality. Stop talking about what you intend to do, only what you intend to do, and start actually talking about and deciding what you need to stop do, or maybe what you'll no longer tolerate in order to make that happen. So with regard to my intention to eat healthily and get daily exercise, I will stop eating snacks before bed, give up sweets, stop driving to the shops and walk instead, and maybe arrange a walk and talk meeting 3 times a week instead of a Zoom call where I'm sat at my desk. Immediately, I can affect change. So take these statements of intent, for example. We will create a culture where all employees feel included. Great. How are you going to do that? We will no longer tolerate microaggressions. That's one way which you can ensure that people feel included. It's an action that has to be taken by everybody. We will create a culture where all voices are heard. But in order to do that, we will no longer tolerate interruptions in meetings. So you see how it takes the onus off the individuals. If you create a culture where all voices are heard, you're saying to people maybe who don't speak up more that we want you to speak up. But what happens if they do and some of the dominant voices cut in? Yes, you've hit your achievement. They've spoken up. But actually, what difference does that make? By stating we will no longer tolerate interruptions in meetings, it puts the onus on everybody. Now, you can modify the content and the intentions to address whatever your organizational EDI intentions are. But the key part of this is the shift, the ability to establish that shared accountability and clarity of behaviors and actions that abstract intentions just can't do. I think intentions are great in principle, but it's too easy to agree to them without any actual change happening if they're too vague. If you state what you will stop doing or no longer tolerate, your intention becomes a statement of fact. And it also makes space for the intended behavior to occur. If I'm honest, this approach to accountability is not for everyone, but the immediate impact though, and the payoff is huge. So talking to action slide. The stop, start, switcheroo. So here's your screenshot. Make sure you've got a little capture of this. Key takeaways. Stop stating intentions and only what you will do, and also start stating what you'll stop doing. Question, what could you stop doing right now that would have an immediate impact on your EDI goals and your growth as an organization? Can you look at your statements of intent and actually include things that you'll stop doing to make them happen? How can you create processes that measure the impact of bringing that in? So you might have had an intention, but the minute you add something in that you'll stop doing and people start acting on it, measure the impact of that. What makes a difference in your meetings? And your self-reflection, which again, I would love you to contribute in the chat. What do you feel you could stop doing right now which would demonstrate your personal commitment to this work? Now, that's a tough one, but I want you to think about it. What do you think you could do right now which would demonstrate your commitment to this work? And while you're doing that, I'm just going to plug my computer in because the battery is dying. Right, what have we got coming up? Stop trying to do everything and focus in on one thing. Absolutely. I think I've missed something. Anything else coming up? What do you feel you could stop doing right now? Okay, if there's nothing else, we've got an SLS. Thank you, Rachel. Have a think about it. You don't have to share your reflections. Call upon your allies and not try and do it all yourself. Thank you, Sharon. That's a great one. Yeah, sometimes we do just take everything on. We don't want to delegate, but actually the impact of doing that. So really think about it. It might be something that comes to you a bit later on. Yeah, Rachel, it is tricky. It is tricky. There is a lot of pressure to take action, but it's small steps. Remember, one tiny little thing. Yeah, it's just something to consider. Don't beat yourself up about it. Absolutely, Charlotte. It goes back to that point, doesn't it, of not trying to do everything at once. All right, we're moving on to our next point. Naomi, love that. Stop being fearful and ready to learn, and be ready to learn. Fantastic. Yeah, takes a lot of courage. All right, this is a big one for me. Ever since I started this work, there has been a culture of calling people out and organizations, sometimes under the guise of speaking up. And in some cases, it may well be justified. You know, if you have an organization that claims to be a supporter of LGBTQ+ rights and then partners with an organization known for its homophobic culture or policies which discriminate against gay men or women, yes, absolutely, call them out for not aligning their behaviors with their values. But there are so many things which require zero tolerance, and they should, of course, be dealt with, but it's how people deal with them. People have started calling out other people, not only for bad behavior, but in some cases, just making mistakes, for getting something wrong or expressing an opposing view. And the problem with calling it out is twofold. Firstly, it often comes from a place of judgment. And I'm a great believer that where there is judgment, there is no love. Where there is judgment, there is no compassion. And secondly, when people are called out, they tend to go into an emotional spiral. What is the key emotion that comes up when you're called out for something? What is that key emotion? I really want someone to get it before I go to the next slide. What is the key emotion that comes up when you get called out for something? You've done something wrong. Guilt, defensive, shame. That's the one, absolutely. Now, if you're not a fan of Game of Thrones, then this slide will mean absolutely nothing to you. But if you are, please can you type in the reference? Who remembers this scene? Oh, who remembers this scene? Come on, where are my Game of Thrones fans? Yes, shame, shame, shame. Okay, spoiler alert. If you're not yet on season 5 of Game of Thrones, first of all, where have you been? But if you don't want to hear this next bit, then please block your ears. Right. This is Cersei Lannister from the Game of Thrones, and this was her walk of shame in season 5. To atone for her crimes, her head was shaved. She's made to walk the streets of King's Landing naked, while a nun walks behind her, ringing a bell and shouting, shame, shame, shame. And this is what comes to mind when I think about when I see people being called out publicly. Because when people are called out publicly, the human response is shame. That person is made to feel bad, now feels a need to apologize, even when they may not understand why or what they've done wrong. Yes, they may get defensive, they feel guilty, they might feel anger. And if this is all happening in the public realm, there's a real risk to reputation. In some cases, it can be a form of abuse if it happens online. And often the intention by the person who's calling them out is to make that person realize they're wrong. And by default, it implies that you are right. In EDI, the goal should be to bring people's behaviors and attitudes and their awareness, to bring them in so they can understand how and why their behavior is unacceptable and problematic, and hopefully help them to reach a space where they take agency and feel safe enough to listen and learn and respond. Did you know that the fear of feeling shame evokes a fear akin to a fear of death? Literally, people will do anything to avoid it. There is an amazing book by David Hawkins called Power versus Force. I really urge you to check it out. I'll ask Fatima to pop the link in. It's only just behind another book of his that I love, which is called Letting Go. But in his book, Power versus Force, he talks about the energetic frequencies we operate from. So when we're below the line, and that line is courage, we are very much in force-based energy. It's reactive. It's a lower vibration. This is when we're feeling pride and anger and guilt. And right at the bottom is shame. In shame, we feel humiliated. And the next step up from that is only guilt, where we start to feel blame. So when we're above the line, we are more proactive. We vibrate at a higher level with a higher level of consciousness. And we live and lead with acceptance and love and a desire for peace. So instead of calling people out, we need to start calling people in. And what does that look like? Well, first, it's about noticing the emotion behind your desire to call someone out, or as my mum would say, to tell them about themselves. Yeah? What emotion is behind your intent? When you think, wow, look at what such and such have said and done, oh, that's out of order. Or you're like, oh, look at them saying that. They should know better. What is that emotion? Notice if it's anger. Are you in judgment? Is there arrogance or complacency or some form of superiority? When we're calling anyone in over their behavior, we want to help them get closer to the line if possible and above it, but we need to already be there. So you're all here because you're on a journey of self-awareness, hopefully to learn more about how to be an inclusive leader and foster an inclusive culture within your organization. And calling people in is a leadership mindset. It's a way to show that your intention in raising issues comes from a place of compassion and a desire to call people to a space where they will be receptive to what you have to say and more open to to change. So here's your talk interaction slide number 4. Calling in gets the win. And this is a really big one for me. We need to stop calling people out and think about calling people in with respect and with love. We don't talk about that enough. Breathe when something happens that makes you feel, oh my gosh, what are they doing? I need to say something. And try and lead with love and compassion. Really important question is, how do your workforce feel about calling people in and also about being called in and called out? Have you had a discussion about that? Do you have permission? Have you all accepted it? How can you create a culture where everyone is open to being called in and knows how to respond if that happens to them? So some of the actions might be to create these opportunities where people are called in, learning opportunities for what to do, and agree a culture of not calling people out. And again, with anything that you put together, share it with all staff and key staff. So another opportunity for you to get involved. What is coming up now? Any SLSs or anything that's coming up when you think about calling people in instead of calling people out? Anything that's coming up for you? Thank you, Judith. Yeah, calling people in, bringing them in to the space, absolutely. And it's so important that, isn't it? Because we want people to be on the journey. It's almost like when you call people out, they've got a reason to disconnect. They've got a reason to take themselves off, to isolate themselves. Yes, Rachel, it's a much more positive approach, but it requires a mindset shift. Anyone who's on LinkedIn will know that, the keyboard warriors, sometimes you have to just take yourself out of that environment because the comments that come up, it can be quite toxic. And I often think to myself, wow, imagine if people actually chose to lead from a place of compassion and love. Yeah, it's too easy to be critical. So the calling in example. So instead of saying you shouldn't be doing that, your organization have said that you're all for human rights and yet you've partnered with this organization, shame on you. It might be a private conversation. It might be an email that says, I noticed that this has happened and I was a little bit surprised because I felt that you were an organization who supported these rights. And I just wanted to say that, are you aware that this is how it might come across? And have you considered, and just talk about the fact that you actually want them to understand rather than being accusatory. So it's a gentler approach, and it's an approach that says, I'm with you. I want to come on this journey with you. I understand that it might be challenging and I understand that you made a mistake. But people need to get over it, because then the other thing that happens is people stop taking action. They're too scared of making mistakes and getting it wrong. Once you've experienced being called out once and you've experienced shame akin to Cersei Lannister walking through King's Landing with a bell behind you, it's going to stop you dead. So it's so, so important. Thank you, Stuart. I hope that helped. And thank you, Naomi. So we're moving on. As I said, this one's a really important one for me. So thank you very much for your engagement there. Number 5, stop just collecting monitoring data. Now, obviously, it's so important to collect data. Also, it's important to collect data regularly and analyze it properly. It's how we establish a baseline from which to measure and track progress, look at the impact, capture where change has really taken place, and identify where there are gaps and pain points. So we know in the music education sector that there are issues surrounding ethnicity and gender within the workforce. And if we want to bring about change, we of course need the power of data to help us better understand the challenges and navigate a way forward. But if we're just collecting monitoring data and statistics, such as the ones you have to provide for your data returns and grant requirements, it only tells us a small part of the story. It's like the introduction to a book and the index without actually the chapters and the story in between. So instead, we need to start making sure we're collecting meaningful data as well. So that's not to say the statistical monitoring data doesn't mean anything. Of course it does, but it means we go beyond the numbers and the statistics and ask those key questions to find out more about what's going on within our workforce. Making sure we find out and ask questions about how they feel, their awareness of EDI issues, their attitudes, their beliefs, if they feel included or excluded, how they want to be treated, how they actually are treated. It's this qualitative data which helps put the meat on the bones of the quantitative data. So I'll give you an example. We recently found out yesterday about the secondary school outcomes for our daughter. And in the lead up to choosing a school, my husband and I did what most parents would do. We went to the Ofsted site, we checked out the reports and the league tables and found out where they were. What helped us to essentially make our decision in the end was when we visited the school. We got a feel for the place. We spoke to staff, we spoke to pupils about their experiences, and found out about the school's vision. That really matters. So it could be the best school, top of the league table, but if we talk to pupils and they don't feel like their voices are heard, they don't feel comfortable, they don't feel that they're represented, it means nothing. So do you create these opportunities to collect this type of meaningful data? How do you do it? And if you have tried in the past, what's the response like? This leads us on to our next talk into action slide. The key takeaways, again, just make sure that if you are collecting monitoring data, it's not just monitoring data. You're really getting meaningful data and asking those key questions that are going to give you more insight for your EDI goals. So the questions to think about, what do you currently collect and why? Is it just for compliance, or do you really want to know? How effective is this data and how is it analysed? Actions to consider. What are the systems that you've got in place for actually collecting quantitative and qualitative data? So how often do you have meetings with staff or focus groups or surveys or opportunities to just find out a little bit more? Make sure that you use the analysis of this to really drive your strategy. And again, share it with all staff, especially key staff. So your self-reflection question now, and make sure you've taken a screenshot of this, the difference in the data download. What are the questions that you really want to find the answers to? What do you want to find out? And if there are any that you're apprehensive about asking, consider why that is. You don't have to pop the answers to that in the chat, but just have a think when you go back to your organization. Do you ever have moments where you're like, I wonder if this is really working? I wonder how people feel. I wonder if everyone feels like they're involved in this. There must be questions that pop up. I don't know about you, I wake up in the middle of the night with questions running around my head. What are those questions? Are you apprehensive about asking them, and why? Okay, moving on to our next slide. So this one requires careful thought and consideration. Stop putting the onus on people from underrepresented groups to lead the change in EDI. Now, firstly, I am a huge advocate for giving purpose-driven individuals the opportunity to step into their greatness and really be a force for change in this work. It's needed, it's necessary, I'm absolutely for it. But often these individuals, like myself, will have a lived experience of some form of discrimination, and therefore, because they have a vested interest in helping their organisation to do the work, they will step up. But it's irresponsible to put the weight of responsibility on these individuals who may already be dealing with unresolved traumas and things which keep resurfacing as a result of now being seen and potentially having to talk about their experiences. Now, some will thrive, and as I said, will step into their greatness, but others might feel under pressure because they're suddenly expected to know the answers to specific problems, and simply due to the fact that they have a specific identity. So the response to this is to start taking responsibility also. Everybody else needs to take responsibility to do the work and support these individuals where needed. And there's a phrase, heavy hands make light work, because EDI is everyone's job. Everyone needs to engage in their own learning and EDI upskilling with the help of people with expertise potentially outside of your organisation. And I would actually say this is definitely something you should do if it's a very sensitive area which can be affected by power dynamics. So if you're somebody with responsibility of EDI is lower down within your organisation and they're expected to speak truth to power at the very top, that could be a real challenge for them. And in those situations, you may want to bring in somebody external. But essentially, you want to ensure that you have a relationship built on trust with these individuals and networks so they can come to you and feel able to really speak their truth and you are open to them doing so. And if you do already have networks or you're in the process of forming them, or ERGs as they're often called across the pond, employee reference groups, ensure you really recognise the work they're doing as value added to the work of your organisation. If they're not getting paid, and I would look to see if you can find resources to make sure they do, but if not, ensure that you link any work that they do as part of performance development plans and any review. I would really invite you to invest in coaching or sponsoring to assist them as individuals with their own personal development. And also make sure that you agree the responsibilities of the role and allow room for growth and also challenge, but without inhibiting them. If you have only one person in the role, be aware that loneliness and isolation can occur from being the only one, and sometimes feeling like they feel like they're the only one who speaks up for certain issues or seems to care. It's important that you and everybody else becomes a powerful ally for them. And also be really mindful of burnout. This is hard work. There's lots to be done. So frequently check in on their well-being, make sure they delegate if they need to. The work can be really rewarding, but it can also take its toll. So your next talking to action slide, take a screenshot. Many hands make light work. And I invite you to think about how leading on EDI can actually have an impact on the health and well-being of people, especially those from marginalised groups, and make sure everyone has responsibility for learning and support individuals where needed. So think about, what support do you offer if you have people in roles, future diversity ambassadors, champions, networks, EDI leads? What support do you have in place? If you've yet to set them up, think about the support structure before you set them up. And how can you ensure that they're not isolated in their role? What allies and advocates do they have to support them? Check and review the role and responsibility regularly. And as I said, make sure that structure is there. So a little self-reflection for you. What are you aware of now when asking for help from people from marginalised groups? What comes up for you now? If you do it already, if you're thinking of doing it, what's coming up for you? It'd be great if you want to share in the chat. Obviously, you don't have to. I'm thinking that behind the screen, you're all sitting there thinking about it. That's absolutely fine. Dawn, it would be really good for there to be a supported network for inclusion leads. Dawn, watch this space. Watch this space. I've got an announcement at the end, which I think will be very useful for you. Okay, we are going to move on to our final point. The last point, number 7, I don't have a TIA slide for this because it pretty much speaks for itself. Stop waiting for the right time to do the work. Obviously, things will come up and you may have other priorities, but just don't wait for all of your ducks to be in a line and ducks to be in a nice neat row before you do this work. Recognize that there is no right time, only right now. So start now. Never ever underestimate the power of now. So with that in mind, I've given you 7 things today that organizations should stop and start doing to really turn talking to action. So now it's time for action. So think about, what will you do right now? What will you do when you get off this call? How will things be different for you or for your organization as a result of attending this webinar? If you want to, you can pop into the chat of all of the actions that were shared on the slides. Which is the one maybe that you think, yeah, I think I might start there? Or what actions do you feel that you're committed to? Or what SLSs might have come up for you? But essentially, what's going to change? How can you be sure that you go back to your organization and something's different? There's been a shift. What's coming up? What action might you take now? Rachel's going for actions 1, 2, and 7. Go for it, Rachel. I love that. I can't even remember which ones 1, 2, and 7 are. No, 7 is definitely active right now. Thank you so much. What other actions are people thinking they will take now? Maybe none of you are going to take any action. That would be a shame. Naomi says number 1 is a big one. Mindful of this going forward and be careful to be specific. Yes, talking about dividing up the 3 areas. Helen, the time is now, absolutely. Sometimes it's out of our control though, isn't it? I know we're waiting for people to confirm budgets and, oh, we've got a restructure coming and we're doing all sorts of things. But actually, it's like safeguarding. You don't go, oh, we'll deal with that issue once we've sorted out our staffing issues. No, if there's an important issue to be dealt with, you deal with it. Calling people in, Laura says, yep, that's going to completely change staff meetings and training. Laura, I'm so glad to hear that. That's fantastic. I'd love to hear how that goes. Separating EDI. Michael says 1 and 2 also. 1 and 7 for Dawn. 7. Focusing on progress and not the goals. Yeah. Rachel, a lot to consider and share with colleagues. That's fantastic that a lot of what I'm talking about, you're doing already. Oh, and I'm so sorry to hear about your COVID. But yeah, just taking it one step at a time. Strategy, focus on the journey and incremental steps. Fantastic. Wendy, number 1 and number 4. Thank you. Brilliant stuff. So whatever the action is that you're going to take, calling people in, Helen, great. Make sure you do something. Make sure you do something. Don't just come away and go, well, that was great. Even if you tell somebody else about it, this is recorded. So you can say, hey, you know what? I watched this webinar. It was really great. I think you might want to watch it. Maybe you could get other people on the journey as well. So that is everything I've got to share. But before we stop for questions, I want to tell you a little bit more about what's coming up. So as a reminder, this was the first in a series of webinars as part of the Talking to Action movement. And I'm really excited that over the coming months, I'm going to be co-hosting 4 more webinars, although they'll actually be Zoom meetings as opposed to webinars, so you will be able to interact. And they'll be around the 4 key pledge areas of data, recruitment, language, and action planning. So make sure you watch this space on the Music Mark website for information and dates. And I'm also running a course as part of the Emerging Leaders Programme for EDI leaders, which will hopefully, and I think it was Dawn who mentioned this, start us thinking about a network for EDI leaders. So that's also coming, and details of that will be coming up next week. The numbers will be limited, so you'll need to jump on it pretty quickly. But I would imagine that if there is a huge demand, then we'll just have to run it again. So we've reached the end. We made it. We have just over half an hour for Q&A. So I am going to stop sharing and see what questions you have for me. Let's do that now. All right, so this is where I need to go to the Q&A tab and see if anyone has any questions. And if anyone doesn't have any questions, then that's absolutely fine. There's no harm in the webinar closing and finishing a little bit earlier. Rachel, you've asked about an example of calling people in. So I think I gave an example, but I'm happy to give you another one. So essentially for me, it's about making sure that, let's say, for example, microaggressions. So you witness somebody making a microaggression towards a person of color, maybe, what's the common microaggression is, oh, so, where are you from? And no, but where are you really from? Well, I'm from South London. No, but where are you really from? Kingsbury. Oh, I mean, where are your family from? Oh, right, Jamaica. It's a microaggression, okay? It sends the message, you don't belong. Sometimes we do this with people who have accents. Oh, that's an interesting accent. Where are you from? Perfectly innocent and unintentional, but the message it sends is, you're not from here. It almost sends a message, you don't belong here. Now that person may not respond in a way that makes you feel like you've said anything or done anything wrong, but imagine if that person is asked over and over and over again. There's a fantastic video, I don't think I've given Fatima the link, which is how microaggressions are like mosquito bites. And it's not the fact that you've made that comment, it's the fact that the day before 10 people made that comment, and last week another 10 people made that comment. And those tiny microaggressions eat away and eat away and eat away, and it's like death by 1,000 cuts. So let's say you witness somebody making a microaggression and you're horrified because you're like, oh my gosh, that's really out of order. You shouldn't be saying things like that to people. It's a microaggression. And your initial instinct is to say to them, that's not on, actually. That could be considered racist. That's a microaggression. Did you know that? You should think about instead asking someone to say, can we have a chat about something that you said earlier? I just wanted to kind of, find out a bit more. When you said, where are you from? I understand that you might have thought innocently where you're from, you were curious, but did you know that actually it's called a microaggression? You know, I know because I've actually done it myself sometimes, but are you aware of how it might make people feel? And can you see the approach is from a case of, I want you to understand. I want you to understand more what it feels like and give them an opportunity to listen and learn before being, that person should know better. They shouldn't have said that. So that's an example of calling people in, bringing them in and helping them to understand and to learn more. And I hope that answers your question. Dawn has put a question. With diversity, how do you approach this with recruitment? A bit concerned about whether there should be specific wording in job adverts and what that would look like. Dawn, what I will say to you is the upcoming webinar on recruitment is going to do a deep dive in this area. Okay, there are lots of things to consider. It's less about specific wording and more about ensuring that the wording that is used obviously is inclusive, but it really depends on what you're looking at and what you're looking for. So it comes back to my point about what is the situation with your organization. So if you want to attract a more diverse pool of candidates, are there any groups specifically that you're interested in approaching? Where is there a gap? Is it because you have a South Asian community within your area and actually you don't have any staff who come from a South Asian background? And in which case, the language that you use, there's not much point in you saying, well, we want a diverse group of people to apply. Yes, you'll get that. You get neurodiverse, you'll get people who identify as LGBT, but you'll get diversity, but you need to be specific about what you want. So it is really thinking about what can you say which shows people that you recognize that there is a need and there is a gap in your workforce, specifically with certain groups, and how can you make sure that the job description doesn't exclude them? How can you make sure that the wording is specific? So we will do a deep dive in that. I would recommend you come along to the session on recruitment where we'll start to talk through those examples and actually give you a bit more clarity around that. So I hope that helps. And Laura said, do you have a list of good places to advertise posts? I do, but again, coming back to the question, the answer to Dawn's question, it's less about where to actually advertise them and more about who you're trying to attract in that respect. And also never underestimate the power of networking. Now, I have people who come to me and say, we're advertising for these roles, please can you share them in your networks? That's all fine and well as well, but I would also say that don't expect people to do that for you if they don't know enough about your organization. So it's almost like, you know, if I ask you to recommend me to a good hairdresser, I want you to recommend me to someone that you've been to and that you know. Whereas sometimes people get into the habit of finding someone within their networks who maybe comes from the group, the underrepresented group that you want to represent, which you hope will have a network of people with a similar identity. But if you have no connection with them, if they don't know anything about your organization, that's the wrong approach to have. I can't hand on heart recommend roles and jobs with organizations unless I know them, unless I know the journey that they're on, unless I'm aware and can hand on heart say, yes, this is a great organization to work for. I've worked with them. I've seen the work that they're doing. They're all about greater diversity, not in a tokenistic way, but they're looking at representation. I want to be able to speak to that and feel that I can comfortably and authentically say that I recommend them. So that's something else to consider as well if you're looking at that road. But if you do have people who work with your organization, and I do it for quite a lot of people that I work with, then that's another approach that you could take. So Laura, I hope that answers your question. Right, are there any more questions? Looks like we might be finishing this webinar a little bit early. If you can think of one that's absolutely fine, just pop it in the Q&A. And if not, as I said, it might be something that you think about later down the line. All righty. In which case, I think we'll finish this webinar early. Oh, I think I might have just seen another question pop up as I was closing the box. Bear with me. Nope, I think we've answered them all. Fantastic. Okay, so on that note, I just want to say thank you. Thank you so much for coming. I really appreciate it. Sorry about the technical issues. It had to happen, but at least it's happened now. And all I want to say to everybody is thank you so much. Have an amazing day. And you know what? If that doesn't work, try again tomorrow. Thank you, everybody. Take care and see you all very soon.